Welcome to the Shark Tank Podcast. Each week, one of the best entrepreneurs from ABC's network smash hit Shark Tank teaches you how to swim with the sharks without being eaten alive. And now your host, serial entrepreneur, TJ Hale.
I was actually told by my boss at one point, I don't pay you to have ideas, I pay you to implement the ideas I give you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to an exciting episode of Shark Tank Podcast. It's a 2-for-1 because these ladies, there's two of them, and they got two sharks for the price of one when they went in the tank. A very, very exciting company that blasted out of the gates and was successful and profitable in year one. This is Kim and Brittany, and they're the co-founders of ZinePak. How are you, ladies?
Doing great, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Sorry, it's Zine. I go back and forth because my wife says Zine and I say Zine, so I know I'm saying it wrong. Will you correct me, please?
As in most things in life, your wife is correct. It is Zine like magazine.
It sounds like we planned it that way. It's true, though. She is always correct. Thank you so much for coming on. I was jacked when I saw your appearance because I thought the product was so cool. And I know so many talented and creative women who I wasn't in the room with at the time who probably saw that and thought, wait a minute, I should have done that. Why am I not doing this? Because they love doing things like this and it brings so much value. So I really want to congratulate you, first of all. But second of all, let's talk about like where the idea came from and how you made it work so fast. I mean, I think I saw $500,000 in gross sales in the first 12 months. Is that right?
That's almost right. We actually hit the $1 million mark within the first year. So within our first, in 2011 calendar, yes, we were a little over $500,000, but within our first 12 months, we hit the $1 million mark, which we were incredibly proud of.
Nuts. So when you started, I mean, what was your goal for the first year? Just to like make money? Was it to make 10 million? I mean, how ambitious were you going in?
Honestly, the only goal that we made was to not draw less money personally than we could have made keeping our day jobs, because we wanted to have our own company and be able to pursue opportunities that we thought were great. So really our goal was to not go out of business. So we were very excited. We went in a bit naive. We didn't know the stats of how unusual it is for a woman-owned business to do more than $1 million in revenue. We were about 8 months into our company when we found out that only 1.8% of women-owned businesses ever hit $1 million in revenue. So at that point we said, okay, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it before our first birthday. So we kind of doubled down and tried to get as many projects as we could from months 8 to 12 to make sure we hit that $1 million mark within the first 12 months.
You see how many things are possible when no one tells you you're not supposed to do something? I love it.
You know, they say ignorance is bliss, and in most cases, I think that's probably the truth.
Totally. I mean, imagine if someone had said, hey, you're women, and it's probably not going to work out because of stats. So just read those statistics. So with regard to the product, for people who can't remember, I'm going to post the Shark Tank highlight clip to show that your segment in the tank. And there's a couple of things you did I thought that were really fantastic. But I want to focus on the product first of all. And the reason is I just got back from the open call in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. And I had a couple people I was working there to kind of help them craft their pitch, because if they're going for the first time, some of them, they don't have time to follow the show. They don't know what to do. They're just kind of lost. But what I thought about when I was watching your pitch is how many people have a business that's really kind of a long shot. Like it's hard to pitch. It's not making any money. It's a 5-year deal potentially to make successful. They've invested a lot of money in it. And the hardest thing to do is be the Simon Cowell or the KevinO'Leary and say, hey, look, we need to rethink this. Look how long it's going to take you to make money if everything goes well. So then you see your business, and I think you did it so quickly out. You know, did you know it was going to be a huge success, or what was how long were you willing to hang on? Because you're big like New York advertising gals, right? I'm thinking Ally McBeal, Melrose Place, like you're on top of it. Like that's not really a question, is it? How did you determine this business? Why was this one the one?
This is Kim. That's a great question. I think our young age had something to do with it. When we started the company, I was 25, Brittany was 27. And, it's like that Steve Jobs quote, stay young, stay foolish, stay crazy. We were just crazy enough to think that we could do it. And so we did. And our goals were pretty low in terms of just, kind of be able to pay the rent and make as much as you did at a corporate job. But I think by having our goals really, close in front of us, we were able to take baby steps. And as long as we kept our head down and kept working towards those goals, the outcomes ended up to be pretty large steps. But I think at the time, because we were so focused on just doing everything we could to, keep our baby afloat, we were able to actually kind of double down and do a lot of good work in the first couple of months.
So for those Shark Tank fans that are listening are thinking, man, I remember this. I remember Kim and Brittany, but I don't remember exactly what the product did. Kevin brought up an objection that I thought was really good about how you need to diversify because you're involved in an industry that's been totally disrupted. And I think that's where the opportunity was. So what you guys do is you bring value to physical products that are also offered in a digital market. And I think that's brilliant. What I don't know is how you got your start. I know you're working with big bands. You've got this great Walmart deal, but what was the first thing you did that brought in a big check, or where you kind of looked at this and said, you know what, this is going to work. People will pay us to do this and we can support ourselves.
The first big distribution partner that we had was Walmart. This is Brittany. I had been working with Walmart for about 6 years, between working for a record company and then an advertising agency. So they had been a longtime partner of mine. And this was an idea that I had had years ago and had been talking to them and sort of priming them for carrying this product. So when Kim and I decided it was finally time to start the company, we said to Walmart, all right, were you serious all those times you said you thought it was a good idea? Because we're going to start this company and do this. And Walmart said, absolutely. If you start a company and can get record companies to let you package deluxe versions of their products, we will buy them. So we always tell entrepreneurs, if you want to be successful, look for the easiest wins first and the lowest hanging fruit first. And for us, the lowest hanging fruit in the label world was the label where my husband happens to be the vice president of sales. So that's where we started. And it was with a brand called Kids Bop. And we said, we think we can make a really cool, really compelling deluxe version of your Kids Bop product. And being the fantastic man that he is, my loving husband said, sure, let's do it. Lucky for us, it was a big success. And other record companies saw it and said, oh, that is pretty cool. I want you to do that for my artist too. So by the end of the first year, we had done about 6 projects with Walmart. And by the end of the second year, we had done 30 projects with Walmart, all with different artists spanning every different genre and every different age, from the Beach Boys to Justin Bieber.
Wow. So I think that's a great takeaway is, you had some inside connections, little mafia thing going on in the background, but it doesn't hurt for people who aren't married to the vice president of a label or a vice president of sales is to go out and find those people and create friendships and give value to them so they can call on them. You talked about how you were serious, right? You really meant that, right? Because anytime you rub shoulders with someone who could potentially open a door for you, you're nervous. Like, if I call them, are they going to remember who I was? Are they going to pretend like we never met? So I'm glad that worked out for you. Now, in terms of something Mark Cuban talks about, which is, everyone says, do what you're passionate about, follow your passion. And he says, no, that's nonsense. Follow your effort. And so I look at your company and say, is this something where, you guys were like scrapbookers and crafty already, and then so you always wanted to go into that? Or when you talk about picking the easiest route to success, was this where you saw an opportunity and said, we can hire the right people to make sure this product is second to none and no one's going to be able to compete with us or create something better? And that's why we decided to do this.
This is Brittany. It's definitely a love we both had. Kim and I had both always wanted to work at magazines since we were very, very young, and music was an important part of both of our lives. I got my first job at a radio station when I was 16 and started writing concert reviews for the station website, and kind of fell in love with helping bands tell their stories and create these fun connections for fans who were in an event. So I think for both of us, it was inevitable that we were going to do something that involved publishing and music and bringing people together in some way.
And I think also, TJ, for us, it's Kim, we really just also thought if we can do one thing and do it really, really well, that's going to benefit us a lot more than trying to do 5 things at once. A lot of times we'll talk to startup entrepreneurs and they'll say, I have this idea for this thing, and then there's going to be an app, and then there's going to be you can log in from the website, which will then, launch into your Fitbit. And it's trying to do too many things at once. For us, we said, what can we focus on, one avenue really, really closely, this one product at Walmart, and do it exceptionally well before we move into all of the other stuff. And obviously now it's been 4 years and we've expanded well beyond just retail. And now we do have an app, and now we do things on artist tours and ticketing and all these other platforms. But I think it's really important that we didn't start out doing all of that. We started out doing one thing. And once we could master one thing, then we moved into these other verticals.
I totally buy into that. Have you read The One Thing by Gary Keller, the book?
No, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, you sound like you're pitching it. That was wonderful because he talks about how, and I see this, you meet entrepreneurs who are already talking about the company as if it existed for 10 years and caps out at, $5 million, and they don't have anything yet. So I'm going to link to the book for people who are interested in learning more about what you just said. I think it's crucial, because if you can't focus on and master the one thing, you're never going to get to that second stage. And if you do, you'll be broke and nobody will know about it. So it's pointless to try. I was curious for you, you've been in Walmart, you've got great sales for the first couple of years. When did you cross that personal threshold? Because in the back of your mind, you have to be wondering, competitors are going to come in, they're going to try to copy us, they're going to try to outposition us. We got to always stay one step ahead of them. Is that with additional, how are you doing that? Are you creating, do you have a goal to create new products every year, or do you have a goal to expand by just capturing different segments of the market and going into sports and other things you talked about on Shark Tank?
This is Brittany. I think it's a combination of both of those things, and something that we know to be true and we've seen to be true over the past 4.5 years. People can copy what we're doing, but people can't copy what we're about to do. So for us, it's been constant innovation, constantly moving into new verticals, new distribution channels, introducing new additions to our product, but also continuing to foster the relationships that we have. And while sure, somebody could copy this model and go to an area that we haven't created any inroads with, for instance, Major League Tennis, if Major League is what tennis is called. And yeah, they could replicate something similar to what we're doing, but they wouldn't be able to go to the people that we're already working with, because those are connections that we've had, that we've been fostering for 4.5 years. So for us, it's been a combination of looking to constantly make our own products and our own systems and processes better, and also innovate and look for new customers at the same time.
I'm going to play a clip here, and this is one of the first objections that came up in the tank, and it was from my good buddy, Uncle Wonderful.
Superior to anything else. And I worked at a couple of other record companies after I graduated, and nobody liked this idea. I was actually told by my boss at one point, I don't pay you to have ideas, I pay you to implement the ideas I give you. And I met Kim, and Kim had similar frustrations from the publishing industry, and we said, you know what, if we do this together with my background in music and your background in publishing, we might be able to pull this thing off.
I jumped the gun. That wasn't Mr. Wonderful yet, but I loved that quote. You know what it reminded me of? I just recently read a book about John Lasseter and his story with Pixar. I'm assuming you're probably familiar with that, but that's what I thought of when you said that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll tell you, we did not have the intention of going on national TV and calling out an ex-boss, and it made for an awkward situation when I got a text a couple of days later that was like, hey, saw you on Shark Tank. That was interesting. But,
like, did you text back and say, new phone, who's this?
I thought about it. I wasn't expecting it to get called out. I immediately texted him and my husband and was like, shit, what's the correct response in this scenario? But, I'm amazed at how many entrepreneurs have similar stories, and how many would-be entrepreneurs or would-be intrapreneurs are thwarted because somebody says, no, don't chase that dream, and no, don't go after that good idea. And I think ZinePak is the perfect example of, if you believe in something, don't let other people tell you it's not a good idea, and don't let other people tell you it's not worth pursuing. Because if you have passion and if you have the drive and hustle to back up your idea, it takes a lot more than a handful of people telling you no to get in your way.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things. And like I said before, with the Shark Tank open calls, and they want you to qualify their idea for them and validate it. And like, look, if someone come to me with a pool noodle or the Snuggie, I would have said, you're crazy, like focus on something else. So I'm always fascinated when someone like you says, this idea I was told it was terrible. And I go back to John Lasseter, being fired from Disney because he was telling them their movies kind of sucked and they need to tell better stories. And then now he runs Pixar, and they had to buy him back for billions of dollars because they said the exact same thing. Look, we pay you to work on our ideas. That's it. If you don't like it, you can leave. And I think that's a great process. I am curious if there were any fears in your mind about the disruption in the physical music industry, because I look, I watch The Italian Job. I know all about Napster. And I also, I was going to say, I went to a John Mayer concert years and years ago. So I'm not embarrassed to admit this, but I remember him telling everyone, look, you don't have to buy my CD, burn them, just buy a t-shirt instead. And he goes, because CDs are going away. And I was like 15 and I thought, is that true? Are CDs ever going away? Like when you go in and talk with Walmart, what do they tell you is going to happen to the physical music industry? Are you the one who's going to buttress it and keep it alive?
So here's the deal with the physical music industry. And we tell this to all of our clients and all of our various stakeholders. We're not trying to capture 100% of the people who want to consume any record. I have Apple Music and I love it. I have Spotify and I love it. And it lets me listen to anything I want with the touch of a button anytime I want. That's amazing. We would never be trying to compete with that. What we are trying to do is capture the super fans who, for any given release, aren't going to be satisfied to just stream it. They want to have something physical in their hands as a manifestation of their fandom. So for me, it's people like Garth Brooks. It's bands like The Killers, artists that I love, that I have everything they've ever released in every format they've ever released it. That's our demo. It's more of a psychographic than a demographic, to be completely honest, because it's different for everybody. The super fans of Miranda Lambert may want very different things than the super fans of George Strait. And what we try to do with our traditional ZinePak releases is figure out what those super fans want and create the most amazing killer product that's going to be a physical representation of their super fandom of that artist. And that's what the company is really about.
I love it. I do have that other clip here, and I thought it was interesting because Kevin, he likes to stir it up a little bit. So after you've talked about how much you've done with Walmart, which I believe was $30 million in 3 years, which is phenomenal, he tried to poke a little hole in your sale by saying this.
I just want to point something out about trying to value what you're worth today. You have a massive risk because you have one customer. Like, why aren't you talking about Best Buy and Target and other customers to diversify your revenue?
Because Best Buy and Target sales together and music don't equal what Walmart sells.
That's not good. Bam!
And one of the things about...
I imagine the conversation continued after that point, but we didn't get to hear it. Now, with your strategy, Walmart's a great customer, but in a small way, I felt like he was kind of right. I mean, you always want to make sure you're working on the BBD, but you also said that you turn down over 50% of the people that try to work with you. Now, are those 50% of like the calls you get off the street, or those 50% of legitimate paying customers who are on tour, et cetera?
This is Kim. It's a little bit of both. Obviously, when Brittany and I started the company, we started it to make money and to grow it and to get it as big as possible, just like any entrepreneur. But we also started it for the reasons that we really wanted to, create a work environment that was something that we necessarily didn't have. We created the company because we wanted to put out really quality products, and we wanted to create the company to work with the type of clients that we really feel passionate about and that we really stand by. I think, unfortunately, you see it a lot in the media today, whether it's Jared from Subway, or any of these other high-profile people that, some things happen in their personal lives or their business dealings, and then all of a sudden your association with them might not be something that you're really proud of. Brittany and I try really hard that all the artists that we work with or companies or clients, that we feel really good about them. We've been approached before at times to work on some projects that, we didn't really believe in. We're probably not going to do something for the porn industry. It doesn't,
definitely not.
It doesn't, it doesn't matter how much money they're going to pay us. For us, it's not something that we ethically want to get involved with. So we also try to stay true to our roots of kind of why we started the company and what environment we wanted to create in the first place.
Yeah, Jared, that's hilarious. And the thing that was really a tragedy is when they showed him on TV after the porn raid, he didn't look as skinny as I remember him. Like, I feel like he hasn't been diligent about staying on the 6-inch sub diet with no mayo. You know what I mean?
Hard life.
Yeah, he probably breached his contract well before. So talk to me about your high-powered partnership. Are you two both alpha? Are you complementary? Are you yin and yang? I think the other day I got a question on my email box about choosing the right partner. And my thought is always, well, it's like a marriage. So like know the person inside and out. But I'm surprised how many people, meet someone at a bar and they're like, hey, we have the same interests. We both like baseball. We should do business together. Let's combine our bank accounts. Like, tell me about how you guys work together and what's made your partnership successful. Or if you hate each other, we can just let it out right now. You're in the nest, in the trust tree.
No, I think it's really great. I think for us, we talk about it a lot in a lot of the interviews and stuff we do. I don't know how it would be possible to do anything as a solo founder. To be honest, I find it completely overwhelming, even when, we have co-founders, because the work never ends, especially in that first 2 years, you really are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we really manned the attitude of, okay, I'm going to do whatever you're not doing. It's a silly example, but I'm a morning person by nature. Brittany's more of a night owl. So for a while, we used to say in the first 2 years of ZinePak, we were kind of a 24-hour shop. Because, I would wake up and start working maybe at 7 a.m. And I'd work, till maybe 7 p.m., whereas Brittany would start at, 10 or 11 a.m. and wouldn't stop working until midnight. So it was kind of like you'd only have like 5 or 6 hours where somebody from ZinePak wasn't answering your email, because we were just working as much as humanly possible at that point. So I think for us, having each other was extremely important and continues to be important because we're able to do a lot of things at different places at different times. And that's been really advantageous for growing our business.
I want to get back to the business growing because I think you've done a phenomenal job and there's probably some great tips you can give the listeners. But let's come back to that a little bit later. I want to talk about Shark Tank. And I always like talking about the objections because there's so much that we miss from the show and the reasoning behind your thought process is left out. So Mark likes to be a contrarian, and obviously there's a lot of interest in your company. I don't know what point during the negotiation he went out, but I wanted you to address what his concern was. So here it is.
I see what you guys are doing. It's great, but I also see the desperation side too. The challenge is it's a declining industry, as you know, physical CDs, and you're aware of that. And you're looking to complement all your other areas. You haven't really given us a strategy to get beyond Walmart. I don't see the future yet, and for that reason, I'm out.
All right, so the D word, that was pretty harsh, the desperation. I kind of jumped the gun on this earlier because I had the same thought, but I look at what you're doing is kind of creating an industry around that super consumer of content, whatever it is. And that's the same industry I'm in to a degree. You have your tribe, which is made up of like super hardcore Follow My Sword fans, all the way down to, hey, you know what, I'll spend a couple extra bucks to buy the deluxe edition. And I feel like the people who can service that upper echelon clientele are going to be uber successful. So what I didn't hear is how you even discuss what the strategy is or why he says you're desperate. I mean, what did we miss from that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we were in there for over an hour, so there's a lot that you don't see. So when Mark says I'm not really seeing the vision, a lot of stuff that didn't get aired was us talking about the strategy of what we would use the investment money for and the types of people that we were looking to hire and the types of verticals that we were looking to grow in. A lot of stuff that we were explaining to him had to do with, again, how we've referenced before, that psychographic, and saying if we have, obviously mastered the art of finding these super fans and engaging with them in the music space, we think we're very capable of doing the same thing in other areas that have super fans. So that can be anything from, Comic-Con, look what it's done in the movie and comic space, to big platforms like NASCAR, obviously massive amounts of super fans, down to the, NFL, obviously the Super Bowl, tons of attention, tons of people really engaged with that platform. So Mark, for some reason, couldn't really see that. And I think he thought that perhaps those verticals were a little too distant from music. But what we were trying to explain to him is really it's about the super fan and less about what they're a super fan of.
Yeah, I thought the NASCAR example was great because as a kid growing up, like every commemorative plate had a picture of a NASCAR driver on it. I mean, the Rusty Wallaces and the Dale Earnhardts, like when you're watching Price is Right, if you guys did that, I don't know. But you're basically like pulling that industry into the 22nd century, right? That's how I look at it. And I don't know if Mark, is he aware that these video cons and Comic Cons, they have to fly, like the Game of Thrones cast had to come in like helicopter in and a police escort to these things. You're telling me those crazies aren't going to pay extra money for your product? I absolutely see the future. I would have disagreed with him on set. I think it's very smart. I'm actually curious, with that kind of interest in your product, like how did you figure out your pricing model? You're kind of a new product, your first year in, you got a lot of interest. Did you tweak it a lot going forward? Are you still tweaking it on a client by client basis?
That's a great question. We have read a lot and seen a lot anecdotally that says that especially women entrepreneurs tend to undervalue their services and undercharge compared to their male colleagues. So that was something we were always sensitive to, was, are we charging enough? Should we be charging more? And something that really helped us was coming from that agency background. And we both worked in new business at the agency that we were at. So we had a little bit of visibility to the types of markups that were typical. And we said, we feel like we can do what agencies do for a whole lot less than agencies are charging and still make a fair profit for ourselves. So that's really when we started the company, where we were coming from, was what do we feel like is a fair price for the value we're adding, but also not so much that it's going to deter people from working with us. Because while obviously it's about making money, and every business has to be about making money or you're not creating jobs and adding value, it's also about having fun. And for us, it was, we're not going to focus on only making money at the exclusion of being able to have the freedom to do the kinds of projects we want to do and operate the kind of business that we want to be able to operate. So yes, to your question of, is it always being tweaked a little bit? It certainly is. And also every vertical has a slightly different cost structure, the same way an agency would have different rate cards for different types of activations.
On the show, you mentioned that you were projecting $8 million in sales. I'm assuming that was 2015 calendar year?
Yes.
Obviously, the Shark Tank tsunami rolled in. What's your projection now? Are you going to crash through that like the glass ceiling?
We hope so. We definitely hope to. We're going to be in that ballpark. The thing that's really unique about us is we're essentially creating new products all the time. So it's not like we created a Snuggie, to use your example from before, and we say we're going to ramp up production and make a lot more Snuggies and sell more of this one thing to different clients. It's creating completely different products for new clients all the time. So it's not uncommon for us to do $1 million of business in one deal. So for us, one or two giant clients can really turn the tide and change the landscape and take us from an $8 million to $10 or $12 million scenario based on a couple of big jobs coming in.
Yeah, and that's exciting. I mean, and in fairness to Snuggie, I think they did change things up. I think they came out with a Huggy, which is like, Huggy Snuggie, you and the lady can hook up together on the camping trip. So they diversified a little there at the end. The one thing, I was talking to Trey, my wife, and we thought this is one of the most fun companies I think I've ever seen. Like if you went to work every day and this is what you're working on, because, so many people like to be on the inside. You get to, hear early about the tours, and you get to meet the artists, and you get to do all that, elbow rubbing. Is it still fun for you every day, or is it a grind? Be honest.
This is Kim. I mean, obviously some days are better than others. It's definitely tough on some days, but for the most part, obviously it's fun. I don't think we would still be doing it if it wasn't. But we're definitely not so completely idealistic and annoying that we're like, every day is perfect. Because
everything is awesome.
Completely not realistic. So yeah, there are definitely, days where we complain or think like, oh, this is terrible. But then we think, what would it be like to work for somebody else or not even have the opportunity to work, which unfortunately is the case for so many Americans right now, that at the end of the day, we're just really thankful.
And it might sound like a dumb setup question, but it was, because the next one is, what is the end game when you rely so much on a creative product, that evokes a certain emotion out of the buyer, and creates this bond between them and the curator. Like, where does this go? Do you continue to scale and potentially sacrifice the quality of the product, or eventually do you get acquired, or do you branch off into different divisions? Like, I'm really curious what your vision is for the company.
That's a great question. For us right now, it's about continuing to grow and scale, and certainly not to the point of becoming detrimental to the product. At some point, we will certainly branch off into different divisions of the company. So the people working on our sports projects will likely be a completely different set of employees than the people working on music and the people working on film, et cetera. So that's definitely the short-term plan. And then longer term, we'd love to find the right holding company or agency family to be a part of so that we can continue being even more efficient in our operations to make really cool products for more fans.
Nowadays, there's a lot of talk in Shark Tank about gold diggers, right? And I'm opposed to this term because I feel like the sharks get exposure and accolades whether they do a deal or not, whether they go through with the deal or not. So I think that everyone goes on the show for the same reason, and that's to promote whatever it is they're doing. Now, having said that, you were asking for a lot of money. You wanted $725,000 for 10%. I'm curious, we didn't hear what you were planning on doing with the money, but I'm curious if a deal was at the top of your list, if you had an optimal deal structure and partner in place, like what was your objective aside from everyone finding out about your great company when you went in the tank?
Absolutely. I think kind of it has to do with the kind of how it all came about. We were on Inc. 35 under 35 list back in 2014. And out of the 35 companies that were on that list, we were the only one that had no investors attached to them.
Wow.
To give you an idea, I think the average investment on the list was somewhere in the $4 to $5 million ballpark. And also one of the Uber kids was on the list. So, obviously that raise was extremely, extremely high. I think they're valued at like $11 billion or something right now. So one of the casting directors from the show reached out to us and said, I see that you haven't done any fundraising. I see that you're, smart and intelligent women. Would you ever consider going on the show? And I'm embarrassed to say, this is Kim. I had never watched the show before, which is kind of crazy, but Brittany had. So, there was half of us that had watched it. So I went home and watched some episodes and stuff. And at that point, we decided, we weren't actively trying to fundraise. We had never, started those procedures here in New York, but we thought, the show seems like a really great opportunity. And if there is somebody that we feel is going to be a really great fit as part of ZinePak, we'd be happy to do that deal. So for us, it was more, we weren't really going on in a kind of desperate attempt that if we didn't have money, then our dreams would die. But we were going at it as if we find somebody, that we're meant to be with. Obviously, it's, it's kind of like dating, right? We weren't going to get like super attached off the first date. But if we found somebody and they ended up being the one, we would have happily gotten married and called it a day.
Now, you did something for someone who doesn't watch the show. And by the way, that makes sense because Kim, you're on the morning shift, right? And Shark Tank's on at night. So that's when Brittany's working.
Exactly. I'm asleep by then.
And the other thing is, I don't know if Kim, I remember posting some stuff on social media and you're on Instagram a lot. Is that you or is that a bot? Because you're a veritable Instagram stalker, I think.
I do play on Instagram quite a bit.
Now, you did something that I thought was pretty ingenious. There's a couple of people when I'm chatting with Shark Tank entrepreneurs about how to navigate getting the deal that they want. A big thing that happens is they get a good offer up front and they have to get out of it and they have to hear the other pitches. Now, in your case, you were trying to get the valuation down to where I presume you had agreed that it needed to be. And you already had offers from Damon, you had offers from Lori and Robert, and you had an offer from Kevin that was ratcheting down every time you spoke. You did something that I don't think would ever work in the VC world, but it worked on Shark Tank. So I want to play that clip.
We have a team of such hardworking women in New York. Before we left, they said, we'd love for you to not do a deal that values you at less than $5 million because we've worked so hard and done so much to help build this company up. So I'm wondering if you all would be interested in doing the deal at 14%.
Wow.
That's just what I said. I'm like, oh, think of the workers, Sharks. We've got people. They're counting on us to get the valuation we want. How many times did you have to practice that?
TJ, it's a game. It's all strategy.
And you referenced it as a game. I was kind of shocked by this, and it's at the end of this clip. You actually called it a game at the end before they went to commercial. I thought, man, look at these two outward in the open, telling it like it is.
No, I'll pass on that. I'm out.
I worked so hard for the last 45 years to get to this seat. I can only go as low as 20%.
Thank you.
Brittany, you're at 14%. We're at 20%.
Just offer them more money.
We will meet you in the middle at 17.5.
Did you guys call her out? 17.5 is not halfway between 14 and 20. Did that get cut out?
we almost did, but we figured, to be honest, we would have said yes at 20. Like going in, what we would have taken was 20%. So anything below 20% was a win.
While we're talking about differences between the sexes, I think you should have said, Lori, that's sexist. You think women can't do math? Come on, give us the 17. Anyway, I'm teasing.
Don't do it.
Let us confer, please.
That was hilarious, by the way.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, you guys did an amazing job.
Your work was beautiful.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
She is solid.
I think
I think you made a good deal, except you overpaid 2 years ahead.
Kevin,
Admit it.
I don't
you
think
can't
you
get it
overpaid.
right every time.
Lori, it doesn't matter what they say.
We're really excited about the deal we made. It was a little more equity than we wanted to give up, but for two sharks, it was a game well
A
played.
game well played. I played the whole clip, 90 seconds, just so I could get to that. That was epic. I was laughing hysterically. How long did you guys practice and study the game before you went on? Because you did execute masterfully.
We spent about 6 weeks getting ready, and thankfully we had two fantastic interns last summer who, after we got the call from the casting director, those interns pretty much became Shark Tank researchers, and we had Excel sheets of every entrepreneur on every episode, and we knew statistically what our odds were of airing if we had multiple sharks versus one shark, what the ask was, what the offer was, because, like everybody else who goes into the tank, we knew that there was a very real possibility that we could film and never air. So for us, step one was all about making it to air, and step two was having a positive edit if we were fortunate enough to make it to air. So one thing that we've talked about before, you may have noticed in the clip that both of us were smiling the entire time. We practiced smiling for an hour because we knew if we smiled the whole time, we would never give the cameras an opportunity to catch us looking confused or baffled or upset. So that we thought it would be a more favorable edit if all they had to work with was clips of us smiling. So for an entire hour, we tried our best to never stop smiling, even when we were talking.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think, the people I've talked to that their edit wasn't as good as they'd hoped, they always edit in that clip of them looking stupid just for a second or two, and they throw it randomly in the show. So that was well played on your part. What else? These are great nuggets. What else did you do to make sure it didn't turn out horrible?
I think we did probably what a lot of entrepreneurs going on this show do. We tried to talk to as many people who had previously been on in different seasons as we could. It's advantageous because we're based in New York. So there's a lot of other companies that are here in the city, whether you're talking about Bombas or Pipcorn, or there's just a ton of New York companies who've also been on Shark Tank. So through our network of other entrepreneur friends, we were able to reach out and schedule telephone calls with each of them and ask them about things that we could do to prepare, or things that they would have done differently if they could, or something that surprised them that they didn't know about. So, for us, that was really helpful, because a lot of the stuff like this smiling nonstop, or like binge watching season 5 and writing down every single question, a lot of those kinds of nuggets came from other people. And I don't think if we had talked to so many other entrepreneurs who had been on the show, we would have been nearly as prepared.
I wish your intern, I would say your intern should have listened to my show, but it sounds like you guys did an amazing job. The smiling one's key. We've never actually talked about that on the show. I've just talked about how many people have that moment where they're like, I don't remember even making a stupid face like that. Like, where did that come from? And then they remember it came from like the minute that they had to stand there. They're just
So if you just smile the whole time, then they'll never have that.
Way to go. Way to go. I'm just imagining you smiling all day long, like in the office, at the copy machine, in the bathroom.
We did. We practiced it. We would go into meetings with people and we would say, hey, we're not creepy. We're just practicing being able to smile for an hour. So please ignore it.
Does it draw you a lot of unwanted attention in New York? Because, New York's one of those places where you don't smile, you're not overly courteous to someone because you don't want to give them the wrong idea. There's so many people. Was that problematic at all?
I mean, we weren't like doing it on the street. It was in the confines of our office. So It's something that we did for the hour we filmed the show. We haven't adopted it as like a life thing.
Yeah, my wife and I joke about that. She'll be at the store chatting some single guy. I'm like, he thinks you want him. She's like, I'm just being nice. I'm like, that's the problem. Don't do it. I'm teasing. I thought the Shark Tank thing went really well. I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up just about, was there anything that really surprised you or shocked you? I mean, I think you got a good edit, but looking back, is there anything you would have done differently? Is there anything that advice you can give to the up and comers to help them as the other ones did for you?
This is Brittany. One thing, and it's certainly not negative, but I think the edit focused much more on us as entrepreneurs than our product. So even after the, however long it was, 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes, I think there were still some people saying, I don't get what they do. And we're a B2B company, so it worked out nicely for us. But from an in sales perspective, we didn't have as many people rushing out to buy our products the next day, because I think a lot of people weren't 100% clear on exactly what we did. They just knew, oh, it's these two women who started a company and they seem like they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And it's funny. That's actually one of the points that I've been hammering home this season, especially, is that like the evolution of reality TV, the first 2 seasons are all about the product. And have you seen American Ninja Warrior? It's on at night, Kim, so you probably haven't seen it, but maybe Brittany has.
I love it. That's my favorite night, is the night that it's on Mondays, because I do the best at the gym, because I'm so much more motivated to keep running on the treadmill longer while I watch it. So yes, I love Ninja Warrior.
Okay, well, you're going to be highly offended by this, because I watched it the very first season it was on, and it's night and day different from then. And it's because it's been like networked now, right? So in Japan, it was all about the person would touch a toenail out of the water and they're done until next year. And they brought it here, and they would eliminate someone every single show at like American Ninja Warrior Camp, and they'd take the survivors over to Japan and compete. And now it's about the story, and everyone, like every other person, gets a B-roll shot, of what they do at home, like herding goats or, driving their kids to school. And then they spend 5 minutes doing that and 30 seconds watching them fall off the second obstacle. And so it's about the inspiration and the story and kind of the emotive feelings that it makes the viewer feel. Whether that's good or bad, I tell people going Shark Tank, expect that. Like, you're going to sell it at some point in season 15. It's not even going to be about the product anymore. It's going to be mostly about how inspirational your story is. And so I'm not surprised to hear you say that's one thing you didn't expect.
We wanted a home package.
Wait, what?
Everybody wants a home package.
How come you didn't get a home package? Are you going to get a home package update, hopefully?
I don't know. We just didn't get one.
We hope we get one. If you want to put in a good word for us, that would be fantastic.
I certainly would be happy to do that. I think if anyone deserves it, and it's a shame too, because if anyone should get more viewing of their product and the creative side of it, I think yours is definitely up there. I will ask for something in return. If I need you to do a job with Michael Bublé that includes a private concert for my wife. So like even trade, pretty much.
Awesome. We'll get working on that right away.
Have you worked with him, by the way? Because I've been forced to ask you this.
We haven't yet, although he would be a great target.
He would. All right. So last thing I want to ask you, is there anything in your business, like a tool or a tech or an app, that you couldn't run it without? Is there something new and noteworthy that maybe my listeners don't even know about that they need to jump all over?
There are a lot of apps that we love and a lot of programs that we love, and also a lot of books that have been really helpful. So we can email over some links for you if you want to include below the podcast for your listeners. One thing that's been really helpful that was especially great for us appearing on Shark Tank was a platform called HubSpot that we use as our CRM and also the entire back end of our website. So it works like a CMS. That was really helpful for us because we have everything that has to do with marketing, sales, communication, and capture all in one place with HubSpot.
Love HubSpot. That's funny. Neil Patel is coming on my show like in an hour. Love HubSpot. Well, ladies, I so much appreciate you coming on. I was inspired, and I think especially a lot of women, the women I talk to that are trying out for Shark Tank, they look at it and opens their eyes and they say, hey, if these people can do it, I'm kind of like them, and I have ideas that are like theirs, and look at how well they're doing. And I think that's been one of the most powerful things about the show is how much that the reality of that translates to people who say, you know what, I'm going to do something. I'm going to start an Etsy store. I'm going to start a blog. I'm going to go on Instagram and sell products. So if for nothing else, have you received a lot of fan mail, or have you gotten feedback from women who are like, you two are awesome, and now I'm starting my own company?
Absolutely. We've gotten a lot of great, tweets and emails and Facebook messages. We actually just had a little girl in here a few weeks ago who at the end of the school year did her 5th grade school project on us. after seeing us on Shark Tank. So she came in here and interviewed us and took some pictures for her science fair board. And we were her 5th grade project. So stuff like that is really awesome and so fun for Brittany and I to see.
How great is that? So if you had to say, just ballpark, have there been more creepy male stalkers or more inspired female entrepreneurs?
More female entrepreneurs. There were a couple of weirdos like out of the gate, but that didn't last long.
Thank you again. I wish you a lot of luck in the future, and we're looking forward to seeing you in Beyond the Tank or an update or just hit that $100 million mark. So best of luck to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you for jumping in to the Shark Tank podcast. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes and head over to sharktankpodcast.net to get the show notes from each episode and join the free Shark Tank Insiders list. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Shark Tank Podcast and on Twitter at Shark Tank PDcast.
I'm a big fan of money. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.